children. And I also want to be really clear when we start that you might have questions that nobody has an answer to. So we're also going to hold that for you. I'm sure that all of you who've been with us over the last day and a half have learned already, as I have, that Rebecca has a deep, deep commitment to listening to children and to basing her educational practice, really, really powerful practice of listening to children. And so I want to start this conversation by asking you, what does it take to listen, really listen to children in this moment? And I also want to say to all of you that Rebecca and I have been spending a lot of time talking about how to have this conversation with you all today. And one of the things that we realized is that there's no way to talk about the tragedy of this moment without also thinking about all of the other traumas that the children in our lives may have already experienced in their own lives. And so you'll hear in this conversation, we will dwell in this moment, but we will also talk about other moments, both COVID and what we've learned about children's resilience in COVID, and also other moments in this conflict that have helped us learn about how we can face this conflict. Rebecca, can you help us understand what you think it means to deeply listen to children in this moment and how you approach that?
I can offer out what I do, which I know is what many educators are doing right now, which is that there is a particular child who is in front of us, a singular individual, and my effort in that moment is to hear what this person has to say. So that's a deep listening to the words that the child is saying, to their affect, to what's underneath their words that they may not have words for expressing, but may express through unusual behavior, through breakdowns that occur more frequently, through wanting to be physically closer, which might look like clinging or more snuggles, but might also look like wanting to engage in more wrestling, because that is a type of physical closeness also. So how we listen to children is really about accessing the person who is in front of us right now. The second thing I'm always thinking about when I'm listening to children is that I'm listening to the person right now. That there is a particular version of this child right now. And what I'm hearing from this child is just what's going on right now. And if I were to talk to this child an hour from now, it's going to be different. That child is going to have moved in some way. The child is experiencing so many different things. So many different parts of them are coming in connection with one another. And that's a fullness of a full human being right now, and how that child is growing forward. So whatever it is that I'm hearing from the child, I'm holding that as the child's truth right now. Also knowing that the next time I come in conversation with the child, it's going to be slightly different. I wonder if you've encountered anything similar in your conversations over the last week.
Yeah, I think. We're gonna do a little dance here on two numbers. Thank you so much. I'm gonna actually switch chairs. I'm realizing I'm uncomfortable in this chair in this moment. Block that out for all of you. And. And I think I wanna hold up something that Rebecca just said, which is that all of us, in order to be in this moment, have different micro moments, right? So there is, I don't know about all of you, but I cycled through a lot of big feelings in the last week. And I'm not the same in each moment. Sometimes I feel rage, grief, confusion, hopelessness, resolve, peace, and more, right? Depending on the moment. And that is also true of children. And one of the things that I have learned about listening to developmental psychologists talk about children in moments of trauma is how important it is to let kids come in and out of the sadness, of the feelings of aloneness, or the feelings of togetherness, or whatever it is. Children need a chance to come in and out, to play and to mourn, to be alone and to be together.
One of the things about listening to children in this particular moment, or in any moment of great complexity and change, is how many other things are activated in that moment that may or may not come directly forward. And so Sivan mentioned that we know and can learn from what has come before with our children. And I thought, again, just by putting some children's words and creativity in front of us, we might be able to hear some of that complexity of what gets brought in to any single moment that is from the child's perspective. We may think we're only talking about what's going on in the Middle East, and in fact, we're talking about, or the child is activated in so many other things. So I'm going to flip to show us. But here we're listening and looking to children as they are in fall of 2020. And we might think that it's only being inside, or the difficulties of being online for schooling that are alive for the children. And yet we can so clearly hear that they're hearing us, they're hearing our anxiety, they're thinking about what it might mean for the parents in their lives, and even the scientists who are maybe touching into their life and maybe not. This child doesn't have a scientist working on the COVID vaccine. Can you put to this slide? They're worried about implications. They're worried about the future of humanity. They're worried about their own family. And they're in conversation with each other. And so hearing what other children are thinking and feeling about the big things going on in their life. And foundational pieces of what they used to think are now coming up. So the world gets rocked, and things get opened that we may not have considered that are getting opened. And just like that first child, they're needing some release valve. And just like Sivan was reminding us, children need and we need all of the things. We need these moments to be together and these moments to be alone and the moments to be able to talk about what's going on and the moments to just go feeling. So Sivan, I'm thinking about the different age children. The two that we met were just in 4th and 5th grade, and we're starting to see something much, much bigger. And in particular, with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I'm wondering what you know and have learned from your research about the ages and stages of development, about what might be inside of children's capacity to see and hear, in particular on this topic.
Thank you for that question. In a minute, I'm going to try and do my best to share with you what I know about the ages and stages of children's developmental understanding of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But first, I want to move from those really profound and quite heartbreaking 4th and 5th grade responses and share with you some questions that I have been hearing from the parents of 1st graders this week. And I want to give voice to these children's questions as a way of getting us into that larger conversation. What can a child even understand? I'm going to share 2 questions, and I've chosen these questions out of the many, many that have come my way this past week to give voice to the real range. Because when we think about ages and stages of development, when we think about children's developmental capacities, we have to hold on to 2 contradictory things that are both true at the same time. The first is that every child is unique. Every child is special in their own special way. No 2 children are alike. Every child is amazing and beautiful for who they are. And that is true, and it is also true that children develop along common developmental trajectories. And there's certain ideas that are both within and outside of, and just within grasp, but only if you reach, for children at different ages and stages of development. So I want to bring these 2 children's questions to talk about the differences among children, and then I want to talk about patterns that I know to be true for my research among children, and I'm asking you to hold both of those things, even though they're contradictory. From a 1st grade parent who wrote me this week, My child came home and asked, in my synagogue, we keep talking about raising money for Israel. How is our money possibly going to help them when in Israel they have a different kind of money than we have? How can our money help? What a complicated question. Where that kid is thinking about really good ideas about currency and economics and the flow of funds from one location on earth to another. From a first grade parent. My child just came home from school and asked me, other kids on the playground said that they cut off people's heads. Is that true? What terrible, terrible heartbreak is there for that child in that moment? And those are first graders, both of those. Even very young children can do and are in this moment, thinking about the horrors of this moment. And the purpose of this conversation is to help us all think about what it means to support them, knowing that kids are in different places. Not all kids are in the same place, not all kids have the same questions, and there's some patterns. So now I'm going to talk about the patterns. All of this comes from various research projects that I have done with colleagues to try and understand how kids think about Israel in general. And one of the things that you'll hear is that in my experience of deeply listening to children, talking about Israel almost always, once kids hit the age of 5, means thinking about the conflict. I did a study with 2 colleagues, Anna Hartman and Lauren Applebaum, to interview dozens upon dozens of children in early childhood settings. And we did all sorts of things to elicit children's thinking about Israel. And no matter what we did, there were 2 things that children in early childhood really just did not ever talk to us about. And one of those was the conflict. We gave children all sorts of playful things to do, including little toy soldiers to play with, and no one in the early childhood age group ever talked to us about war, soldiers, death, or dying. I think that in early childhood, the conflict is out of grasp. I also know that children of every age, including babies, pick up on the anxiety of the adults in their lives. If you are working to support children in the early childhood years, which I'm defining for the purposes of this conversation as birth up until age 5, different, right? Sometimes early childhood is thought of as extending through age 8, but for now, birth to age 5, you bet that children know that something is not right with us and something is not right in the world. They don't quite yet have the developmental capacity for thinking about geopolitical conflict and terrorism. And if you're supporting an early childhood learner, it's kind of sitting in that they actually probably don't understand. And also they deeply understand that we are not all right, that all is not all right. In another study that I did, which is a longitudinal study tracing children from the start of elementary school through the end of middle school. When I talked to kindergartners, and I asked broad, open-ended questions, like really broad, what is Israel? For most children, the very first thing that they would tell me by the time they hit kindergarten is something like this. Israel is the place where the Jewish soldiers die. Kindergartners, first graders, and second graders, that's one developmental category, are deeply aware in a way that early childhood learners are not that Israel is a place involved in an ongoing, sometimes violent conflict with another team. And I'm using that language on purpose because that is the language that I often hear from children. The other guys, the other side, the other team. Usually, when children tell stories about that other team in kindergarten, first and second grade, they are talking about Palestinians, not other actors in the Arab world, not anyone else. They're talking about Palestinians, and many children tell stories about our side, the side of the Jewish people, and their side, and kind of indeterminate other team. Kids who are learning to read, and by learning to read, I mean doing the acts of learning to decode. Letters have sounds, sounds get strung together into words which have meaning. Children in that phase really rely on adults to get information about the world. But a switch happens, and for most children, that happens sometime between second and third grade, although for some children it's before, and for some children it's after. And that's a transition that literacy specialists call the transition from learning to read to reading to learn. Once children have the capacity to read on their own, where they don't have to spend all their time just decoding a word, they can pick up a text and read it. Most children that I have talked to have reported that the primary way they get their information about Israel and the Middle East is by Googling, starting in second or third grade. And I'll tell you why that happens. I want to introduce you to a child named David. David was in the beginning of second grade when the 2014 Israel-Gaza war broke out. And he went to a restaurant with his family in California. And they were sitting at a restaurant, many generations of his family. He was there with his parents, grandparents, and some uncles. And in the corner of the restaurant was on silent, on mute, the television screen. And it was on some news channel. And he noticed, scrolling on the bottom of the screen, the ticker tape. He did not know the word ticker tape, but he saw the words, and he reported to me that what he saw was Israel's at war, bombs, rockets, bad things. And so he turned to the adults at his table, and he said, "Oh, what's going on? It looks like some bad things." And in his telling, they said to him, "You don't have to worry about that. You're safe. You're okay." And he thought, "Don't have to worry about that. I'm already worried about that. Nobody will tell me what's going on." So he went home. And after his parents thought he was asleep, he then turned on the computer in second grade and he Googled rockets in Israel. And he watched whatever came up on a random Google search, rockets in Israel. By the time kids can hit that phase of really being fluid enough leaders that they can do their own independent internet search again, sometime between second or third grade, it's a whole different ballgame. And kids are able to, they can, and they do stream videos, read news sources, read random blogs, none of which were designed for children, none of which were curated by adults for children's use. By the time kids hit fifth grade, the children, at least in my research study, make a really profound shift where they start realizing, oh, it's not just about Israel and the Palestinians. There's a whole global conflict here. And what about Iran? Iran has a role in this. And what about the United States? The United States has a role as a broker in this conflict. And kids, by the time they hit about fifth grade, are able to start to understand a much larger global context in which this conflict exists. And whenever it is that kids get to the point where they themselves have access to social media, another shift happens. That happens in radically different moments in different families, depending on the parental choice around access to social media. But I repeatedly hear from children that the online conversations that many adults are very, very familiar with, in which Israel is a politicized and polarizing topic in online conversations, is true not just in the online conversations of adults, but also middle schoolers, and Jewish middle schoolers often feel like they are holding the online really hostile discourse with really profoundly big questions about how to navigate that. This is just kind of a general overview. I am happy to give kind of more specific or answers if people have questions about particular parts, but that's kind of a general. How kids start to come into an understanding of the conflict.
Thank you, Sivan. I think one of the things that's so helpful about the research that you're sharing with us is that it helps prime us as the adult listeners to an arena in which the child might be speaking. It helps us to hear or be ready to hear a little bit more readily what might be going on with the child and what might not be going on with the child. Again, so that we can be in dialogue and conversation with the person who is right in front of us. Oh, and then Sivan, the last stage you just talked about was a middle high school stage where kids are online, they're interacting on their own with things coming at them, perhaps from people that they know, perhaps not. But feeling like these things are directed right at them. Social media is just, it is a level of complication in terms of how we as adults might be in conversation with the children, especially during those ages where they might not be inclined to just simply tell you what's going on. And yet you know that the information that they are experiencing is so profoundly going inside and influencing their own thinking and feeling and perhaps acting. And I guess from your research, from the many, many conversations that you've had this past week, can you tell us something about what this might be like for children and how we as adults might be in conversation with this age?
So in order to think about the role of social media, but also just the much broader internet, that is not just about social media, but right, any kid can go and search anything that they know how to type. I want to tell you a story that happened in 2014. I was working with a child named Carly. I had known Carly from the time she was 5 years old in kindergarten. And in the summer between Carly's first and second grade year was a terrible moment in the conflict. I want to bring you back. Israelis call this moment Suk Etam, Operation Protective Edge in English. And one of the main catalysts for that moment was the kidnapping and eventual murder of 3 Israeli teenagers. Until this week, that was, in my experience of listening to children, really the heaviest moment in children's attempt to understand the conflict. And Carly knew, again, 2nd grade, an excruciating amount of detail about these 3 teenagers. She started off by telling me how sad she was, but also a little bit happy, because she knew that in her community, when babies were being born, they were being named after the 3 Israeli teenagers who had been murdered, and how sad and also a little bit happy about the babies she felt. And then I asked her to tell me more. Tell me what happened? Tell me the story behind that. And Carly told me a story that at the beginning aligned quite tragically, perfectly with what was actually playing out in the news at the moment. She knew about the kidnapping of these teenagers. She knew about the Israeli response, which included incursions into Gaza. And then she did this, at first to me, a little bit puzzling thing. She said, the teenagers were locked in a house and the 3 of them were together. And they escaped. They ran away. Sit with me for a moment in the puzzle. She told me that the boys had been murdered. She told me that Jewish babies were being named after these Israeli teenagers. And she also told me that the boys escaped. They got out and they got home. Rewriting trauma, rewriting traumatic moments so that it has a different ending is actually something that children who themselves experience war and violent conflict are known to do regularly. In order to process horrific events, children who themselves have experienced horrific events often tell and retell the story not as it happened, but with the redemptive ending that they desperately want to be true, even though they know it isn't. I learned a lot of things from Carly's story. But one of the things that Carly's story got me thinking about was a phenomenon that I've also heard in the stories of many other Jewish children in the United States, whose bodies are safe and whose psyches are not. This is something that I have come to call remote trauma. And I use that word remote to mean 2 different things. It is far away. It is not in their lives. They are safe. And yet they have remote controls and they have computer mouses and they know how to navigate it and they can access it. And they do. I have heard dozens and dozens and dozens of Jewish children in moments of conflict say things like, I saw it. I witnessed it. I know what happened because I saw it. And they don't mean that they themselves were in a kibbutz on the south witnessing Hamas terrorists. They mean I saw it on a screen and I felt as if I were there and I too experienced trauma. I will date myself a little bit with this next story. My very first month as a full-time teacher was 9/11. And I was a middle school teacher and stood in front of a classroom as a brand new teacher with children's profound and heartbreaking questions and absolutely no answers. And one of the things that research on children post 9/11 has shown is that when children watch horrors on repeat, they are traumatized. And children need a chance to talk and to process about what they hear and what they know. And the act of talking does not traumatize children. It actually helps them build resilience and face the really profound questions that I don't know how to answer about good and evil in the world, about what redemption might look like in this moment. Kids need a chance to process, but they also need to be protected from witnessing remote events that they take so personally. And it's our job as we support children in those moments to walk that very, very, very fine line. We can't not talk about this. We can't not give space to children to ask their ideas and their questions. We cannot watch it on repeat with them. We have to protect them, and we cannot protect them. And it is in walking that middle line that I think we'll be able to help them, maybe a little, even though we don't have answers in this moment.
Power of those conversations, the power of those conversations that we can have with children puts boundaries around their experience. Helps them push things in to a place where it can settle in a way that can be lived with. And the act of speaking helps put those boundaries around it. So that it isn't just this big unknown thing, but it's been something shared. It's been something heard by somebody who really cares about me as a child. And the opportunity to have these conversations again and again as the child grows and shifts in their own thinking and feelings, and as the world around them changes and there's new information coming in, so the child is changing again. It is the ongoing conversations that the child has with their trusted grown-ups that can really help them corral in all of those big feelings and make them more manageable.
I'd like to ask you a question, Rebecca. Because when we started this conversation, we said we wanted to think together about what it means for us as adults to support children in this difficult moment. And I want to give you a chance to think out loud with all of us, and then we're going to give you a chance to do that also about what you think it means based on all of the many, many beautiful things you know, and all of the many, many big questions that you don't have answers to. What does it mean to support children in your community at this moment?
As I said at the beginning of our conversation, Sivan, the capacity to listen to this very child in this moment is so incredibly supportive for the child and often back to us, because then we don't have to guess and have our own big worry about what the child might be going through. We can be in process and in conversation with the child. And one of the things that helps us be ready for those conversations is our own inner calming. As hard as that might be, but opening ourselves up so that we can hear right where the child is, as opposed to what's going on inside of ourselves. The second thing that I think helps us hear children and be in conversation around really, really huge concepts and complexities and difficult things is to remember what we care about in the first place about these children. We hope, we want them to grow as compassionate human beings. And when we hold that compassion as where we're going with the children, like that's the big aim. We know that we want them to care for all human beings on earth, and if that care is what we can hold as part of the conversation, even though we don't have answers, it will help us have the words which help children in that direction of compassion. And that makes a difference. That means that we can be together in a much less traumatic response, but in something that we really truly care about, to be in conversation, to move us forward. I wonder how you see it, Sivan. I wonder what it has been. And for you, offering support and care for children, and how we might do that. We're going to switch microphones.
I started to tell myself, and I will tell this to all of you in case it helps you, that the work of supporting children at this moment, in addition to drawing on this, all the stuff we already know how to do, it's about walking a whole bunch of tightropes. One of them I already talked about, right? We can't let them see in all the graphic detail what has actually happened, and we can't not let them see. They have to be able to have a place to talk and process. One of the other things that I have learned in listening to children at other moments in this conflict, although no moment has been like this, is that children are asking us two things. One is to help them understand the world, even though perhaps especially because the world is sometimes a really horrible place. And we can't do that without also talking about the world as it should be, like Carly did in her redemptive story. We also have to hold up for children that there is something better than this moment. There is something better than this tragedy, that there are human beings in most places in the world who deeply care for one another, in every place in the world. I'm going to retract that, sorry. In every place in the world, there are human beings who deeply care for one another, who support one another, who come together in community, and children themselves can be part of that work. At another point in this conflict, I can't remember right now, I think maybe it was in 2012, there was another Israel-Gaza flare-up, again, not like this moment. I just collected stories of children's ideas generated by children about how they were going to do something. And I heard stories of children running lemonade stands so that they could actually earn money to give to the causes that their synagogues and schools were inviting them to participate in with their own labor. And I heard children making cards and writing poems, singing songs for other children. Children themselves have a capacity to do good things. And the world is also a place of good things. And one of the many tightrope that we have to walk at this moment is to let children think about the bad things and let children also be part of the good things. We know we've done a lot of talking, and we're also purposely modeling for you two stances in our own way of talking. One is a stance of simultaneously drawing on what we know and trying at least to have real humility about the things that we don't know. We think that's an important stance for talking with children at this moment. The other thing is, I want to call attention to the fact that I know, I saw in some of your faces, I saw the tears, and I know you saw it in mine, and you heard it in my voice. And in case anyone is asking, but can we do that around children? Don't we just have to be calm? We are also modeling calm voices, and the emotion still overwhelms, and that is okay. That is truthful, that is powerful. In my community in Los Angeles, there was a vigil on the Sunday after the Shabbat of the greatest tragedy. And the most senior rabbi in Los Angeles, who heads the Federation, got up in front of a room of thousands of Jews from different synagogues who had all gathered in one place to be together and wept. And I heard from children, it was so powerful to see that you can be weeping and you can still also be standing. And it is okay for children to see our pain. It would be a lie to pretend that we were not pain. So with those two stances, calm voice and pain held all at once, and drawing upon what you know and standing with humility in the face of all we don't know, we want to turn things over to you. We're going to start with a question, but we also know that you may have questions for us. But the question we want to start by asking you is the same question that we just asked each other. What is it going to take from you to hold the children in your lives and in your community at this moment? Yeah. What is it going to take from you to hold the children in your lives and in your communities at this moment? And if you're muddling through it, so are we.
I have an old child who's in Jerusalem. And I really resonated with what you said about this sense of what can I do? How can I make a difference? Right. So like what's keeping him there is a sense of being part of being able to support others, right? The importance of standing together. And so how do how do you keep a child safe, right? When you can. And yet, how do you let them grow in the way they need to grow in this world?
I want to say again, want to hold up a question, an impossible question that I just heard Carla ask. How can you keep a child safe when you can't?
Not an answer. And there's so many different kinds of safety. One thing that Sivan and I have been talking about is the ongoing surety that there's somebody in my life who cares about me. And that I care about somebody else. And that connectedness is a type of safety. And it's a kind of safety that a child can walk around with. It doesn't answer everything, but is one strand that we can have right now.
I think it's interesting to try to hold the space between being sad all the time and kind of forgetting about what's going on, and so how to like pull it back into their consciousness without causing full-blown trauma. But also, you know, letting them feel that it is ever present at this moment.
The only strategy that I know about managing that challenge, right? You don't wanna bring children back into the sadness if they're not sitting in the sadness, right? But we also want to play them if they are. Is the broad open-ended question that I know everyone in this room knows how to ask. Hey, just check in and how you feel in this moment. I have heard in my own house, I'm doing awesome. Although it's so fun today. And I've heard, I am totally unraveling. I just read the headline. And it doesn't have to be about this, right? Just like, hey, how you doing? What's going on for you? Is one strategy. I think it's the only strategy I know. Maybe others in this room know others of letting kids get one.
Sorry, just to clarify, what I meant was when football was great and the whole day was filled with soccer and birthday parties and wonderful things, is that an appropriate time to say, you know, before we have dinner, we want to just think for a moment about our cousins in Israel or the scary things that are happening, because we want our children to be in that space, because that's the space our community is holding, right? How do we honor the sadness, not just our children's emotions, but the contextual space around our children? Like, how do we pull them away from trauma, but also remind them that it's still there? That is more what I was asking. Or maybe we don't.
No, I wanna think about that for a second. I don't have a quick answer, but I also, can you all hear me without the mic? Okay.
They might not be able to.
Jill, how have you been doing it? Like, we're already a week in.
Yeah.
How have you been doing that in your family?
Well, I think we do take moments. I mean, I will say, while Will was here enjoying the conference yesterday, before dinner, we did say, we talked about being grateful and touched on, and I said, you know, some people might not want to do that this year. If you don't want to share something you're happy about because we feel kind of sad most of the time, a little bit, that's okay. Or when we pull up to school and the kids ask, why are their police cars were really far away from Israel? You know, saying, well, you know, when we're sad about Israel, we feel sad here too, right? And trying to like pull those connections in, but I don't know, and I'm not. I think sometimes I err on bringing it in too much. I don't know.
If I speak loudly, okay.
Yes, yeah, yeah. What I hear you saying is, you are using the natural moments that come up to be in conversation or to answer the direct question that was asked. Why are there police cars? And the answer how you understand it. Answering a child's question directly with the context that's right there in front of them. And a lot, that's how the child is moving through the world. This thing is in front of them, it's confusing. Wonderful that they were able to open that up and ask about it. Those are wonderful moments to bring in your perspective.
I'm gonna go back to the mic, that way I can be heard and followed, which is how I need to be in the moment. I also just I'm gonna say something that I know you know. I know everyone here knows, but I wanna say it anyway. You are also a human being in your family. And your feelings also matter in your family space. And it is okay, you also get to say, I am feeling sad in this moment. When we talk about supporting children, we don't mean erasing ourselves. So you can also, at any, it is reasonable to also say, okay, this is how I am sitting in this moment. And you don't have to assume that your children are or are not sitting in that place with you. They may be, they may not be. They may come into that space with you and they may choose not to. And that is also okay.
I've really struggled this week with the two kids who are very different, and like the idea that within my own household, one size does not fit all. And on Friday night at synagogue, I really asked my rabbi, is it appropriate for our kids to come tonight, or should we hang back? And knowing that there were gonna be other kids there, we decided to bring our kids, and at one point I like openly wept, and one child who has a very high emotional EQ was very very aware of my own sadness, and like came and sat on my lap and was stroking me and holding me, and the other one like was so checked out and couldn't take in anything, and you could tell she, like by her body, like she was very fidgety, very distracted. She was sitting with her friend, and like that feeling of I want both of my kids with me right now. I need them, and I had to really switch my brain off because it isn't about me. And my older child just like wasn't there, and I couldn't force it. And so my husband and I, we agreed to let her get up and walk around and remove herself from that space. And like, that was the moment for me in my parenting where I just like, I knew that what I needed was not what she needed, and I had to be okay with that. And going forward, knowing that my two kids are so different in how they internalize everything, I feel like I've always sort of walking that line, and that's been a real challenge for me. I'm learning every day from them by trying to listen and trying to pick up on their cues, but that for me has been the most challenging.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's so profound. And it means for at least another tightrope, because we get to be our own people who have our own needs, and we have to hold our children's needs. And sometimes that's really easy to do all at the same time, and much of the time it's actually really not. And I just want to thank you for knowing the kids and their differences, to know that one could hold you and one needed to walk away. And that's what I learned from watching masterful people like Rebecca, who are so good at listening to children, was being able to know what child needs what, but also in what moment, right? Because even the children who might hold us in our tears might also need to walk away. And even the children who also need to walk away might also have moments where they need to be held. And so it's that practice that you are so masterful at that helps us read that moment, just as you have done for your children. Thank you for sharing this.
Sort of an impossible question, but I'm curious, in your story about David, I believe was his name, the second or third grader who was at the restaurant who saw the ticker tape that Israel was at war. I'm curious, what considerations would you have when trying to construct a response to that? How would you try to answer that question, understanding that child is so young, they're clearly curious about it, they're witnessing aspects of it, and they may not have the emotional intelligence to be able to manage the physical events that are going on. What do you consider when trying to construct that answer?
I'll start with the child. What do you know? Oh, tell me what you saw. Oh. I have a little bit of information to work with. I've got information about especially with the week test or like the following what they saw. Especially if I can affirm whatever it is, not going to be angry, I'm gonna love you no matter what. I've got some information about what they know. I've got information about how they're taking it in with how I read their body and their tone of voice. And I can help use all of that to construct a straightforward, straightforward, concise answering what they said. And now I'm going to turn to Sivan.
The first thing I ask myself when I hear a child asking about a moment is, what are they asking me? Because sometimes it sounds like kids are asking, what is the history of this conflict? What is Gaza? What is Hamas? Oh, by the way, how is Hamas different from Islamic Jihad and ISIS and what? Sometimes kids are actually asking those questions. Much more often, kids are asking a different question, which is even harder. How do I live in a world where people are so horrible to one another? I don't have an answer to that question. I'd rather answer the Hamas ISIS question, right? But the first question that I ask myself internally after doing what Rebecca does, which is just so an emotional check-in and a factual check-in, what did you think? What did you hear? What is that making you think about, wonder about, worry about? What are your feelings? Right? Is what do you seem to be asking me? And some questions, children are asking for adults to be the experts. Explain to me what it means when I read a headline and it says 1.1 million Palestinians are being asked to evacuate their homes. Like, what does that mean? Where do they live? What's the geography of Gaza look like? Okay. And sometimes we know the answer to those questions and sometimes we don't. So if we know the answer to those questions, we can give answers. And if we don't know the answer to those questions, we can say, I actually don't know that, but I know how to find it. I can help us look it up together, or I can look it up and get back to you. Sometimes kids are asking for adults to give them answers. Much more often. Kids are asking adults to fit in the hard questions that don't have clear answers. And if a kid is actually asking not what is Hamas, but Why do people think that it is, why does someone, any human, think that it is okay to go into another human being's house to kill them? They are not asking a technical question that an adult has an answer to. They are asking a moral question. And often that's the beginning of a profound conversation. And those profound conversations also can come in and out, right? So it doesn't just have to be. We have now settled the question of the Odyssey. We're not gonna settle that, but we can think about it together. And it's the word together that I wanna offer you. We, most of the time, are not actually the experts. We actually don't have the answers. But we can sit with children and think about their questions together with them.
So I am happy to not be the expert in things, but there are moments when children are expecting us to be the experts. And one of those is in safety. I got the question a lot last week. Am I safe? No, I really want to say yes to all of our students and my own children, but I don't know how to answer that question.
I see the pain in being asked to be the person keeping children safe. We know how very heavy a burden that is at this moment. In the aftermath of Pittsburgh, which was much closer to home, here is the language that I used in my home and in my community. And I offer it to you not because it's the perfect language, but because it's all I have to give you in response to your pain. We are doing everything in our power to keep you safe. We care deeply about your physical safety, and we care deeply about your psychological well-being. And here are all the things that we have and are putting into place to make sure, as best as we can, to protect your body and your soul in this moment. It's not a promise that we will protect you, that we know for sure we will keep you safe. We can't. We tragically cannot make that promise as much as we want to, but we can assure children that we are doing everything in our power. Everything we know how to do to put safety protocols into place, to put psychological counseling into place, to give children a place to feel connected to one another, to adults who care for them, who love them. We will do everything in our power. That's what I'll say by way of closing, and then I'll turn it to you if you want. And if you don't, then it's okay. We are in an impossible moment. Anyone who supports the community, anyone who supports children in this community, anyone who supports families in this community is carrying an incredibly heavy burden. And we're doing it together. And that's all we can do. We cannot, and really, really wish today more than ever before that I had a magic wand that could fix what is actually broken. I don't know how to rescue hostages. I don't know how to bring the dead back to life. All I know how to do is sit with you in your pain and help you remember that you know how to sit with children in their pain. Together.